Hello, viewers. You are welcome to another edition of AI Coding or Coding for AI. My name remains Vincent Hope. So, we are still on AI and building an AI chatbot. Now, we are on lesson 5, which is our fifth video recording. So, in this lesson, we're going to be treating how to load and search the knowledge base. Remember, in the previous lesson, we learned how to create a knowledge base. And I think in that lesson, we also treated how to do it in using the raw form of a raw direct knowledge base. Now we're going to, in lesson 3, we treated how to create a file in JSON. So I suggest you go to that lesson, those lessons and the previous lessons so that you can follow up on what we've been doing. Now in this lesson, we want to learn how to load and search the knowledge base. Now, if you are to load and search the knowledge base, you must create a JSON file. So let us follow the procedures and see what we need to achieve. Now, step 1 here. Step 1, create a knowledge base file. You are not using the raw method, so you have to create a file that will store the information. So as usual, we import JSON, the module. Then after you import JSON, then you define the data. Now we call the data knowledge base equals to open parentheses. Now these are the questions. Question 1, what is Python? The answer, Python is a programming language. Second question, who developed Python? Answer, Python was developed by Goodyear Van Rossum. Third question, what is AI? Answer, AI stands for artificial intelligence. So if we have defined the data, which is what we did here, we have taught it in previous lessons, the next step will be to, let me scroll down a bit. The next step will be to now write the data to a JSON file. And how do we do that? We use this code with open knowledge base, which is the name of the data, .json, comma, W here, which means write as file. Write it as a file. Now, the command that will put it into, this is to open a JSON based knowledge base file. This one is to dump the data, which is the knowledge base, into the file and make it human readable. So json.dump knowledge base, the content, which is this one, dump it into this file and indent. Let's take this command again so that you have a grasp of it. First, open, which is with open a knowledge base.json file. Write, put W here for write as a file, so you're opening it. Now this file that has been created, which is called knowledgebase.json, dump the information, which is this information, dump it into the file and make it human readable. Make it human readable. Then when you are done with that, you can now print the content. Now say file knowledge base or file knowledge base JSON has been created. So let's run this. Let's run this. We run this right now. We run. You will see where it says file knowledge base.json has been created successfully, because that's what the last output that was you gave coding or instructions to be generated. So let's make progress. Now, after you have created the JSON file, which you did this using the data, step 2 is to search for matching questions. Search for matching question. So the first thing now to do, you have to define a variable, and we define our variable as load knowledge base, in bracket the file name which you opened, the file name. Okay, so with open file name, read as file as f. Remember, we are defining this function. So that you are simply saying define this knowledge base as a file name with open file name dot read as file, return JSON dot load file. So you have loaded, this command will load the file here. Now you put KB, which you will use as a variable for knowledge base, equals to load knowledge base, which is this now, which because you have defined it, now you can use it. Now load knowledge base, in bracket put knowledge base.json. So this was the file you created, the knowledge base.json. Now you put this file, the content of this file, into this knowledge base. When you load it here, then you transfer the content to KB. Now user input is equals to input u, which we have used severally, which is the content what you enter from the console. Now the next thing you do now, say for q in KB, which is q represents query or questions, sorry, for q in KB, which is for question in KB, which is questions, column, if question q in bracket question dot lower, remember you are normalizing it here, is equal to user input, then lower, normalize here, print bots question and answer. Now you're simply telling the code to print the bots question and answer. Now let's continue. We'll see more details about that. Else print bot I don't know the answer. So let us do one example so that before we do the explanation. So if I run this code here, I run this, it now asks me for an instruction, which is this one, this code here, u. Now I will follow the prompt of the questions. Well, let me choose any question. Let me choose number 3, which is question is what is AI? And the response, AI stands for artificial intelligence. So let me type it here and type what is AI, and I press, is a question, I press enter. It says, the bot says AI stands for artificial intelligence. So it just did only one response because that was the code that was added here. Now let's make progress and do some explanations on the things we have treated. Now the strategy to here now is to understand the code. Let me expand it. Okay, understand the code. Here is what each part does. Now let's explain each line of code. First, import JSON, which imports the JSON module to read the JSON files, which we've already explained in several lessons. Load knowledge base, file name, opens and loads the data from the JSON file. Opens and loads the data from the JSON file, which is okay. So where did we do that? Opens, we said load knowledge base file name, load knowledge base file name. Okay, look at it here. We defined it here. Okay, now we now say load knowledge base file name, which is here. Okay, now the next one is what? KB equals to knowledge base, stores the loaded data in the variable KB, which is what is shown here. The loaded file, which is knowledge base.json, was loaded and everything was transferred to this variable here, KB. Now let's continue. Okay, input u, which you have just seen, I just made an input here, asks the user to type a question. So I typed a question, and you now say for q, which is like question or query if you want to use that, but question in KB, question, loops through each question in the knowledge base. It checks through each question. There are 3 questions there. So if I check any question I type, it takes the first one, checks the first one, checks the second one, checks the third one. That's how it runs its operations. Okay, so the next thing it does, remember we're explaining the code. Now, if question dot lowercase, that if you normalize it, equals to user input dot lower, that means if the question is equal to the user input, what was typed or entered by the user, checks for an exact match, ignoring the case. That means checks exact match. That means checks the exact match from the questions. checks question 1, question 2, question 3. It checks the exact match. Okay, now let's make progress. It checks the exact match. So the next thing it does, it now says, if it checks the exact, it now says print bots question answer, shows the answer for that match, for the exact match of question you entered. Else, if no match is found, it prints a default response. What is the default response? The default response is, but I don't know the answer. Now, show a default reply when there is no match. So that's what it does. So that is the explanation. Now, step 3, remember in this formal procedure here, it only stopped at one entry. It terminated. But if we wanted to make it continuous, now we'll have to add this one here, which is the while true code. While true, user input equals to input u lower, normalized. If user input is equal to exits, print bot goodbye, then you break. Now for Q, which is the loop in KB, questions, if questions the lower is equal to user input, print bots, print the answer. That means if there's a question that matches, then you print the answer, you're giving the code. Else, print I don't know the answer. So let's run this one now and see how it operates. So it is asking me to answer a question now. So the first question here is, what is Python? Let us enter that question here. Yes, what is Python? Put a question mark, press enter. It said Python is a programming language. You can see it's continuing because of this while loop, while for else. While for else, which that while loop was not here. It's only for else. That is why it stopped at one entry. So the while makes it continuous. So the second question we're going to enter. Let's take the second question. The second question is, who developed Python? And the third is, what is AI? So who developed Python and what is AI? So let's type it here. Who developed Python? Press enter. Python was developed by Gildo Van Rossum. Then the third question is, what is AI? Question mark, press enter. It says AI stands for artificial intelligence. So it has answered all the 3 questions in the knowledge base. Now let's ask it a question that is not there. Okay, let's say, what is your, press enter. It says, I don't know the answer. That is what it says. It says, I don't know the answer. So the first thing we do, we create a knowledge base files by importing JSON, define the data, which is this. Then the next thing we did was to open the knowledge base file using this code, then dump the content of this knowledge base into the JSON file here. Then we printed this out. We just printed this out and it said the file has been created successfully. Then step 2, we search for the matching question. Remember, the topic is loading and searching. Then you define the knowledge base, define it, file name with open, file name R as F, return, and the rest of it. You enter the code as we have highlighted very well. Then you also let me cancel this. You also run the code. So you search for the matching question. Then finally, the code, if you want continuous input, you use this command here and enter. So this is how you load and search a database in you learn how you code how to load and search a knowledge base you have created with a JSON file. So I hope you have learned something in this lesson.